Welcome, everyone. Good evening. I'm Donald Tobin. I'm the Dean at Maryland Carey Law, and it's my pleasure to be able to welcome you this evening. As most of you know, our environmental law program is one of the best in the country. The Feder Lecture, which the program organizes, is well on its way to becoming one of those great intellectually provocative events that we look forward to year after year. And I'm sure this year will be no exception. We are deeply grateful to the Feders for their support and the support they've provided to the environmental law program. It is with their generosity and shared passion for the environment that have made this lecture series and many other activities at the law school possible. I'd like to give a special welcome and thanks to Amy Polikoff, Joel's and Amy Feder's daughter, who is with us tonight. Excuse me. Yes. Ellen Feder, excuse me. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you again so much for your family's support. This year, thanks to the generosity of the Feder family, 4 of our law students were able to travel to Oslo, Norway, last June to present papers at the annual colloquium of the IUCN Academy for Environmental Law. These students join a glowing list of Feder scholars who have been able to share their ideas with top environmental law scholars from every corner of the world. This experience showcases the great work of our environmental law program while preparing our students to become leaders in tackling the planet's global environmental challenges. I'm going to deviate for a minute to talk a little bit about why that's so special, because one of the things that was Joel's passion was getting students more engaged in environmental law. And one of the things that happens because of this is our students are going to present these papers at these international conferences. They work really hard to write these amazing papers so that they can go to these conferences. And this year I happened to be traveling in China, and some of our students were presenting parts of what they were doing, or the start of what they were doing in China. And it was really amazing to see our students competing and delivering lectures with some of the best other scholars. It's really special. So it was very moving. So I just wanted to share that. Now I'll go back to what I'm supposed to say. So Joel Feder devoted the last chapter of his life fighting climate change. He understood how political indifference or paralysis threatens the environment. He recognized that the global dimensions of our environmental problems require a global response. He joined our faculty and students on a trip to China to meet with Chinese environmental law scholars and students and activists. He made it possible for us to host the IUCN Academy's colloquium in 2012, which brought to Baltimore hundreds of environmental scholars from all corners of the world. The event was such a success that it played a major role in the Academy's decision to choose our law school as its new secretariat, a transition that became effective last summer. And we're doing that with Pace Law School. For this year's Feder Lecture, we have the honor of having Ben Wilson present to us tonight. He is the managing principal at Beveridge and Diamond, one of the top firms in the country, and he specializes in environmental law. He is one of the most sought-after environmental law experts in the nation. He is a national leader on efforts to improve diversity in the practice of environmental law. He has helped make his law firm a family-friendly practice where young lawyers love to work, and he consistently hires some of the best and brightest graduates from our environmental law program. So for our students in the room, remember his name, remember who he is. So thank you again for joining us this evening. It's now my pleasure to pass the microphone over to Professor Percival, who will introduce this year's Feder lecturer, Ben Wilson. Thank you.
We're really honored this year to have as our Feder lecturer Ben Wilson. I think it's fair to say that his law firm is the top law firm that specializes in environmental land use and litigation in the country. And we've come to know his law firm and be very fond about it because of so many of our alums telling us such great things about the firm. Ben is an honors graduate of Dartmouth College. He graduated from Harvard Law School with his JD. For the last 8 years, he's been the managing principal of Beveridge and Diamond, which now has over 100 lawyers in 7 offices. As Dean Tobin said, he's played a major role in promoting diversity and environmental justice. He's taught environmental law and environmental justice at Howard University Law School. He's won so many awards that if I was going to go through them all, we wouldn't have time for his lecture. I got to know him because he's on the Board of Regents of the American College of Environmental Lawyers, and he's also on the Board of Directors of the Environmental Law Institute. He's founded the African American General Counsel and Managing Partners Network, and the most wonderful thing about him, from my perspective, is how his firm has really set the model for how to be a law firm where you can do incredibly good work with the best and the brightest and yet have a really family-oriented atmosphere. Every one of our alums who's gone to his firm has nothing but great things to say about it. And believe me, that has an impact on what firms go to the top of the list of our current students when they're applying for jobs. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Ben Wilson.
Thank you, Bob, for that very generous and kind introduction, and I would second the Dean and thank the Fetter family for what your family has done for these wonderful students for so many years. And great things don't happen by accident. They're a product of an intentional act, so thank you very much. I need to go over, would you mind passing me my reading glasses? Should have known better. The title of my remarks this evening is Environmental Law and the Opportunity to Change the World. Why not you? Why not now? That's a question that they ask in our family. My father would always turn and say to us, why not you? And some of you that may follow football may know that my nephew is a quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson. And he's a shorter quarterback. And but his my brother, having heard that same thing from our father all those years, would say to Russell, why not you? And I add and challenge you this evening, why not now? You see, it's an honor to be with you tonight, and I'm going to take a few minutes to speak with you about the awesome profession many of us in this room have chosen and the unique opportunities and privileges we have as environmental lawyers. So I'm going to start with a quick and formal survey. What made you choose environmental law? Janie, what made you choose?
I was interested in a lot of the environmental issues around me, especially growing up in the Chesapeake Bay area. So as I learned more and more about those issues, I learned about the opportunities environmental law brought.
This was not scripted. She didn't know this was coming. Her husband's smiling. He said, whew. Any students over here, what caused you to choose environmental law? Why are you interested? Yes, please.
When I graduated high school, Deepwater Horizon exploded and caused one of the largest oil leaks in the history of the world. So even though I did not have any hazmat training at that young age, it kind of made me want to pursue an education in which I could help stop an event like that happening again in the future.
Outstanding. Anybody else over here? There's a young woman in the back there. Jen-
So I guess I always tell the story that when I was younger, I got the opportunity to go to Wales, and I was standing like on the top of the mountain, looking at the world around me, and I just felt very small. And I knew that I was going to work in the environment, but I had the question of how. So once I went to school and started studying, I knew I needed to sort of get into regulation and be able to actually make change now and really what I knew around it.
Wonderful. And there's a young woman in the back, please. Need you to stand, need you to project, hear that wonderful voice.
Not only growing up with environmental issues around us, but my father was from California. My grandparents were in the farming industry or the fruit picking, and they're in the farmlands in California with all these pesticides, and ended up getting cancer. And I
Bob, I envy you. I can see why you enjoy spending time with these wonderful students and former students. And as I suspected, many people in this room entered this field in recognition of the fact that environmental law, unlike many other legal fields, offers the unique opportunity to actually shape the world around us. How many of you, by a show of hands, are interested in just a little change? Just a little, okay. How many of you are interested in transformative change? All right, I always raise both hands to make up for the 3/5 of the Constitution. You know, I like to double my pleasure, make up for those past votes. I thought you'd like that. That's pretty good. Now, next, tell me, how old do you think you have to be to affect lasting change in law? I met the professor coming in. How old do you think you have to be to make lasting change in law?
Well, we've seen some people who are in high school and who've done some wonderful things.
Okay. Anyone else? This young man over here, good-looking fellow with the beard. I used to have one like that. You can change the law in high school. Okay. Well, as we will discuss this evening, it's my judgment, I happen to agree with you both, that you don't have to be 65 years old with 40 years of legal experience to change the world. Some of you may think that the heyday of environmental law has come and gone. To be sure, that conclusion is not without some basis. The Clean Air Act was promulgated in 1970, with revisions in 1977 and 1990. The National Environmental Policy Act was enacted in 1970, and the Clean Water Act, originally enacted in 1948, took on its modern form in 1972. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, 1976, the Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA, 1976, CERCLA, 1980, EPCA, the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, 1986. These laws subsequently had to be interpreted and applied, forming the legal doctrines that are the bread and butter of environmental lawyers' practices today. You might say to yourself, what is there left for me to do here? What difference can I make? And I'm here tonight to tell you to take heart. Thank goodness that these 40-year-old laws continue to be applied in novel situations. Let's talk a little bit about the reform of existing environmental laws. The good news is that the statutes of the 1970s must evolve to meet modern needs. In May 2016, Congress passed legislation to reform TSCA. The reforms amend a crucial section of the law, Section 6, to make it easier for EPA to evaluate and, if appropriate, regulate chemicals. There's a young woman who's talking about chemicals up there. Environmental lawyers and policymakers recognize the need for change and work to overhaul and improve a long-standing environmental law. Environmental lawyers are adapting existing laws to modern needs. A lawyer graduating from the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law this spring can become an expert on this new, improved TSCA statute. Someone over here is saying, why isn't he talking about the Clean Power Plan? I'm glad you asked that question. In the face of rising greenhouse gas emissions and the inevitable consequences thereof, the Obama administration and EPA launched the Clean Power Plan under the rarely used Section 111D of the Clean Air Act. Section 111D enables EPA to set a goal for a reduction of air pollution from certain sources and allows states and tribes to choose how to meet that goal. This September, the Supreme Court stayed the plan pending litigation in the D.C. Circuit and any future Supreme Court ruling on the case. At oral arguments in September, the opponents argued that by necessitating the restructuring of the nation's power industry, the plan is an, quote, enormous and transformative expansion in EPA's regulatory authority without clear congressional authorization. The government argued that because major changes in energy sources are routine and have long been affected by the Clean Air Act, the plan is not a transformative and therefore impermissible expansion of authority. Environmental lawyers are shaping the role of our nation's climate policy. Now, some are concerned that the election of a new president sounds the death knell for the Clean Power Plan. But I suspect that, like Twain, reports of the Clean Power Plan's death are greatly exaggerated. Time will tell, of course, and in the meantime, we're going to need environmental lawyers to help us figure it all out. Citizen suits. Students working at your clinic here, the Environmental Law Clinic here, have already learned how to utilize citizen suit provisions to enforce environmental laws. Where our federal and state agencies lack the resources, it is crucial that private citizens acting as private attorneys general step in. Young environmental lawyers are enforcing our laws. And the reason that's so important, there are many who believe that the president-elect will follow through on his vow and that we might not see the aggressive enforcement. But that doesn't mean states can't act. That doesn't mean citizens can't act. And most people aren't aware of it, but these citizen suit provisions provide for attorney's fees, right? They were modeled after the civil rights statutes. Let's talk about privately imposed environmental change. There are major retailers like Walmart. They're increasingly recognized for their influence on global supply chains. In 2006, Walmart announced a 5-year plan to reduce packaging on products sold in its stores by measuring suppliers' abilities to develop greener packaging and conserve natural resources. As part of a broader business sustainability strategy, Walmart aims to reduce overall packaging used by suppliers by 5%. This month, Walmart released a guidebook for suppliers to improve packaging sustainability. The guidebook, known as the Sustainable Packaging Playbook, describes what Walmart expects from its suppliers moving forward. Anybody here ever been to Cincinnati, Ohio? Queen City? Right. What's a major employer in Cincinnati? Procter & Oh, I love this class. This is great. P&G. I suspect we all have many of their products in our homes. Bounty paper towels, a quicker picker-upper. Pampers diapers, Old Spice, Charmin toilet paper, you know, it's Crest toothpaste. Look, Mom, no cavities. The packaging of these products is more environmentally friendly because of pressure put on Procter & Gamble by Walmart. The government did not make Procter & Gamble revamp their packaging. Walmart's buying power did. Other companies are following suit. For example, IBM now conducts environmental evaluations of certain suppliers and hazardous waste service and recycling providers. Coca-Cola recently announced that it is close to reaching its goal of returning the amount of water it uses in producing its products. They use 300 billion liters of water per year to produce 160 billion liters of beverages. And they're giving this water back by implementing efficiencies at their plants, putting into effect wastewater treatment standards for their manufacturing facilities, and developing water conservation projects around the world. You see, environmental lawyers are helping corporations self-regulate and set new industry best practices. Let's talk about environmental justice. And I've taught at Howard University Law School for 10 years now. They like me there. Can you imagine why, Professor? Well, it's because I'm free. But what I teach my students is that environmental justice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. I also try to teach my students to win. My clients don't come back to me because of the college try. They don't come back to me because of my intelligence, as you can see, the absence thereof, or my good looks, as you can view, but it's because I win. And during her senior year, and here the professor's right, during her senior year at Benjamin Franklin High School, that's a high school here, isn't it? Destiny Watford, current Towson University student and Baltimore resident, led a group of her peers in preventing construction of what would have been the largest incinerator on the eastern seaboard in her community. Ms. Watford's community, Curtis Bay, I believe that's southeast Baltimore, somebody needs to correct me here, is home to many industrial facilities in addition to being the most polluted zip code in the state of Maryland. This and future generations of environmental lawyers will have to ask themselves these questions. How do we prevent certain zip codes from bearing a disproportionate brunt of industrial activity? How do we prevent and avoid Flint-like environmental justice disasters? How do we make sure that federal and state agencies and companies are taking environmental justice into account in their everyday decisions? Let's talk about Title VI in the Environmental Justice Executive Order. This past September, the United States Commission on Civil Rights issued a scathing report analyzing EPA's compliance with Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the Executive Order on EJ 12898, which requires all federal agencies to incorporate principles of environmental justice into their missions and to assess the environmental impact of their activities on communities of color and low-income populations. The report found that EPA has largely failed in providing relief to communities of color impacted by pollution, and that the agency does not take action when facing environmental justice concerns until forced to act. 2 months later, EPA released its EJ 2020 Action Agenda, the agency's strategic plan for ensuring that minority, low-income, and indigenous communities are not suffering disparate environmental and public health impacts. You're going to hear this refrain again. Environmental lawyers are helping to ensure that environmental justice is addressed. We need environmental lawyers to continue pressuring government agencies and companies to take EJ into account and to devise creative solutions for solving environmental justice issues. Well, I think there must be somebody on that back row that wants to talk about clean energy. Yes? You're supposed to say yes. Today's environmental issues threaten the very existence of our nation and our world. Global population is increasing, so are standards of living. Energy demands correspondingly are increasing. All of this is taking place while the implications of climate change are becoming clearer. We need alternative energy sources, but we also need some time to perfect these sources. Fortunately, the United States has an abundance of natural gas, giving us time, if we use it wisely, to figure out how to store solar energy and wind energy so it is available to us when the sun does not shine and the wind does not blow. Once we have the technology in place, we will still need a legal framework for new sources of energy. This requires environmental lawyers, lawyers who can work with engineers to ensure the proper legal tools are in place to facilitate the storing of solar and wind energy. Environmental lawyers like you are helping our nation and our world transition to cleaner sources of energy. Let's talk a little more about climate change. As of last October, the world has warmed approximately 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit, according to the New York Times. And although the greatest impacts of climate change are yet to come, the effects of climate change are being felt now in very real ways. Several years ago, I had the privilege of attending a program at the World Bank. And an official from India told me the true finance minister of the country is not Mr. Sri Arun Jaitley. The real finance minister of India is the monsoon season. Monsoon rains provide over 70% of India's total annual rainfall. Indian agriculture, which accounts for 14% of the country's GDP, relies on the monsoon season as the steady source of water. The success or failure of 50% of India's total workforce engaged in the agricultural sector remains at the whim and caprice of the weather. With climate change disrupting these patterns, an entire industry is being forced to further adapt to an already unpredictable force. Climate change may still be debated by some in the United States, but impacts on businesses like agriculture is a language even business people can decipher. Businesses can understand that if all their customers are forced out of an area due to flooding or other inhospitable conditions caused by climate change, they will not have clients to serve or customers to purchase their product. Businesses like agriculture depend on relatively predictable weather patterns, and they can understand the very concrete impacts of climate change. Every United States business should adopt a risk policy that takes climate change into account. Environmental lawyers can help businesses mitigate potential losses from climate change. At the same time, climate change has and will continue to displace people from their homes in the United States and across the globe. I'm so impressed that through the generosity of the Beveridge, you have the fortune to take your students to a different continent in the world every year. Can you imagine? You think I could come back to school here? Absolutely. Gee, Monique. Give you a scholarship. Boy. There must be an age limit on that. In January 2015, the Department of Housing and Urban Development announced grants offering $1 billion across 13 states to adapt to climate change. A portion of these funds was spent on relocating a community that lives on a small island in Louisiana. Anybody here from Louisiana? Well, you might have to tell me how to pronounce that. Is it Isle de Jean Charles or is it Ile de Jean Charles? All right, Ile de Jean Charles is being inundated by seawater, destroying any farmed or naturally occurring crops and habitat for animals, not to mention destroying the homes residents have lived in for generations. Ile de Jean Charles is not the only threatened American community. Several communities in Alaska have begun the process of relocating due to erosion and flooding. In 2008, the village of Kivalina, Alaska, any Alaskans here? All right. They sued ExxonMobil seeking monetary damages for flooding caused by climate change. Although the lawsuit was ultimately dismissed, it provides one example of how environmental lawyers can engage with issues related to climate change. I'm about halfway through, maybe a little further than that for those who are anticipating the wine tasting afterward. But if you continue to smile, it'll go faster. Let's talk about international environmental law. Looking beyond our borders, the United States' relationship with the rest of the world presents one of the most important environmental challenges of our time. Recently, I had a chance to speak with former Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson, and talk about his views of our country's relationship with China. He believes that it is one of the most important bilateral relationships in the world. He says instead of competing with China in every respect, we should work with China on so many of the issues where our interests are aligned. For this reason, he organized the Paulson Institute to work on strengthening the United States-China relations through the mutual advancement of sustainable economic growth and the protection of both countries' environments. The battle between the world's reigning #1 economy and its greatest challenger need not end in war. The two largest polluters in the world, the U.S. and China, should work together. The Paris Agreement, whatever its ultimate fate in the United States, represents a step towards enhanced collaboration. Now, lawyers at my firm, and by the way, several of them are here tonight. We have 11 lawyers who are the graduates of this law school. Yeah, give it up for that. One of them, Hillary Jacobs, helped me with this speech. If there's something good, it's her fault. If there's something bad, it's certainly mine. And I'm so proud of Megan and Janie who are here tonight. I thought, was Jessica coming tonight? There she is. Stand up, daughter, so we can see you. There you go. So proud of them, and they contribute so much to our firm. Lawyers at my firm work on international environmental issues every day. We advise companies on how to comply with product stewardship measures in various countries, which regulate every aspect of a product's life cycle, from product design to end-of-life consumer and commercial products. Our practice is not your father's Oldsmobile. We still do the old dirty dirt, but now our clients bring us in when they're designing a product. That's awfully exciting to see that on the board and think about, how do we deal with this product cradle to grave? Lawyers at my firm help multinational clients navigate emerging environmental law doctrines in Latin America. Do you have any Spanish or Portuguese-speaking students here? All right, I see. Go wave that hand proud like you mean it. All right, very important. We have helped clients comply with bilateral, regional, and global multilateral agreements, from the Kyoto Protocol to the Biosafety Protocol to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Environmental lawyers are helping companies and countries comply with and create complex international obligations that will improve our world. Now, when I came in here, I overheard somebody say, Donald Trump. Did I hear that right? And of course, we all face the uncertainty that comes with the new administration and all of its new promises. The 2016 election results will have wide-ranging impacts on the future of American environmental law, policy, and enforcement. Our future president may seek to undermine specific initiatives such as the Clean Power Plan and the Waters of the United States rule. The new administration will appoint at least one Supreme Court justice who will have a major impact on the fate of environmental laws and regulations. Although our president-elect vowed to withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement, I suspect he did not read it, because doing so would in theory take 4 years, according to Article 28 of the agreement, which governs the withdrawal. However, what will continue to persist will be long-standing environmental statutes that have transformed America's environmental landscape. Enforcement of our key environmental statutes will continue, and as I mentioned earlier, states and citizens can and will continue to see that our laws are enforced. Environmental advocacy NGOs have vowed to continue pursuing their missions. These groups will likely seek to fill any voids they perceive resulting from the new administration's environmental agenda, possibly in the form of citizen suits, tort suits, and continued disclosure pressures. States will continue. Anybody here from, well, young woman has California roots. Any other Californians here? New Jersey, the Garden State, there you go. States will continue on their own to take steps toward addressing climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Companies can and will continue to be stewards in their fields, setting examples and demanding change. Now, more than ever, environmental lawyers have a critical role to play, helping to navigate the challenges that will arise in the next 4 years. Maryland, the United States, and I dare say our world needs strong, committed environmental lawyers in private practice, working for the government, and for public interest groups. We need environmental lawyers to help old laws evolve and stay current in an ever-changing world, to help enforce environmental laws, and to help corporations become more sustainable. We need people with a vision to design and enforce a system so that we have a world we can pass on to future generations. To quote John Adams, facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. We need environmental lawyers who make their arguments based on facts and law, not just feelings. So if and when you're addressing any of these issues, whether it be environmental justice, climate change, corporate policy, you must marshal facts and law. This skill is just as essential in environmental law today as it was in 1770 when Adams defended British soldiers in the Boston Massacre trials. Now, somebody's saying, maybe this young woman right there, or these young women sitting in front of her, they're saying, where are these opportunities for young people? No, you guys ask hard questions. Well, of course, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Justice, and state equivalents such as the Maryland Department of the Environment, Maryland Energy Administration, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and the offices of the Attorney General for the state of Maryland, the Office of the Attorney General of the state of Maryland. What may not come to mind quite as quickly are agencies like the Department of Transportation, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Defense. There are opportunities for environmental lawyers with the largest global companies and also with the smaller energy startups. Public interest groups and environmental law clinics need good lawyers. And dare I say, law firms like mine, Beveridge and Diamond, where 11 graduates of this law school work, also offer opportunities for young environmental lawyers. Now, my final point this evening is really my first point. You really don't need to be any particular age to get started. Let's see, what do I have here? Whoop. Not bad. At age 29, anyone know who this is? Well, let's see. At age 29, Rachel Carson, that's not age 29, became the first woman hired by the United States Bureau of Fisheries, where she began her career as an environmental writer, writing brochures and other materials for the public. I say to this generation of women, for several hundred years, not only in this country, but around the world, writing was the one thing that a woman could do without interference from a man. By 34, she had written her first book, Under the Sea Wind, and as we all know, Ms. Carson went on to publish Silent Spring, a book that many credit as starting the environmental movement. There she is. Now, Bill Ruckelshaus, who would one day found my law firm, helped draft the state of Indiana's first Air Pollution Act at age 29. At age 38, he became the first administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Several years later, when President Nixon was upset with the refusal of then Attorney General Elliot Richardson to fire Professor Cox, the president fired Richardson. That made Ruckelshaus the acting Attorney General. He refused, and he was fired. Out of work, he started my law firm. I'm glad he did. Let's see. I went too far. Well, nobody's perfect. Lisa Jackson, former EPA administrator, was 25. Anybody here 25? All right, I got a proud hand up there. Go ahead. When she began working for EPA, regulating the cleanup of hazardous waste sites under Superfund. At the ripe old age of 40, she was asked to serve as commissioner of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection, and 7 years later, she was the administrator of EPA. Let's see. I may have fouled up my photographs. I think I did. Well, nobody's perfect. Well, that must be Lisa Jackson. How do you like them apples? Henry Diamond, a founder of my current firm, was only 34 when he served as executive director on the 1965 White House Conference on Natural Beauty with Lady Bird Johnson. That event helped elevate environmental issues onto the national agenda in the years leading up to the establishment of EPA. Henry went on to serve as the first commissioner of New York State's Department of Environment and Conservation. Let's see, who else do I have here? There's Henry. Now, what he did to raise money for a project there, he took a bike all across New York State. And really a remarkable man. I miss him. And there Henry is again. And this is Robert Bullard. He's known as the father of the environmental justice movement. He was in his 20s when he began conducting research on the siting of garbage dumps in black neighborhoods in Houston. This research ultimately led him to publish Dumping in Dixie, hailed as the first book to articulate the concept of environmental justice. Don't all speak at once, but tell me if you recognize this fella. Yeah, we dig them up, baby. At 28, Professor Bob Percival, who has taught or is currently teaching many in this room about environmental law, was clerking for Supreme Court Justice Byron Whizzer White. Today, he teaches the next generation of environmental lawyers and plays a vital role shaping the emerging field of global environmental law. We're going to stop me and applaud Professor Percival. He was a handsome so-and-so, wasn't he? Last but not least. Oh, there we go. Anyone recognize this child? Excuse me? Thurgood Marshall. Ah, you got it. Last but not least, Thurgood Marshall was only 27 years old. Anybody here 27? All right, raise those hands proudly, ladies. 27 years old when he brought Murray versus Pearson, the case which not only desegregated the very law school in which we currently sit, but also set a legal precedent making segregation in Maryland and ultimately in the United States illegal. 27. Damn. Handsome so-and-so, wasn't he? That's his Lincoln University picture, I believe. In his class was Langston Hughes, Kwame Nkrumah. It's a pretty good class, graduating class. All right. So I end this lecture asking a question. What transformational change do you intend to make? Why not you? Why not now? And in the words of that famous environmentalist, Bo Jackson, just do it. Thank you. All right, any questions? And those that I can't answer, I'll pass on to the dean and the professor.
What did you do when you were 27?
Let's see. Well, I started practice in Atlanta. I met my wife first day of law school. I had a good vantage point, and I was going to give her a tour. Of course, she was always smarter than me, and but I had better eyesight than she, so I could read the signs of the buildings in advance. But all I knew was where the football stadium was. But however poorly I started, she did give me a second date, and we have 40 years of marriage, so I'm proud of that. But at 27, I was with a law firm in Atlanta, King & Spalding, and that was a firm that gave us Griffin Bell, who was the then Attorney General. They were big supporters of Jimmy Carter. And Bob, I did something rather impertinent. So Judge Bell was being nominated to be the Attorney General of the United States. And I was at one of these fancy-dancy private clubs where I could not be a member, and perhaps some of you could not be a member either. And he says, how's it look for me? I said, Judge, it looks great except for Palmer versus Thompson. Palmer versus Thompson? Palmer versus Thompson? What was that case? I said, Judge, that was a swimming pool case in my hometown of Jackson, Mississippi. He said, wait a minute. That's the Fifth Circuit. I was a district court judge. I said, yes, but you were sitting by designation. He said, what was that case about? I said, well, the city, rather than integrate the public swimming pools, closed them all together. and they claimed they were closing them because they weren't making any money. But we all knew why they were closing those swimming pools. Anxious, and he was anxious the rest of the dinner. But you know how you're 25, 26, 27, you'll say almost anything? And I did. But one thing I would like to tell you that's not in my resume, I failed at my first law firm, okay? I remember the first brief I wrote, there was more red ink on it. This one, they used to have red ink, than anything. I knew there were local rules. I didn't realize that the judges had their own rules. And they sent me to tax, which was like going to Siberia. And so I decided I would work on my writing, and I published 6 articles in a year. And the professors will tell you what it takes to publish an article. I published 6. And my writing improved. And then I decided to go to the Department of Justice. Have you ever seen the musician that can play without the music in front of them? Right? Or the player who can dribble the ball without looking at it, but dribbles like that, dribbles with their head up. I wanted to have that facility and that confidence. So I went to the Department of Justice and I tried cases, and I badgered my supervisors. I want a case, and they'd give me awful cases, and I'd win them. But I wanted that experience, and so I was in federal courts all across the United States. And I remember I was 8-0, and I went to see my former supervisor. He says, "Oh, that's pretty good," and I was 23-0. He says, "Well, the person who's never lost a case has never tried enough," and then I was 57-0. And then I realized I was a little bit like Gatsby and Daisy, right? Remember, he wanted Daisy to pretend she never loved Tom. The fact is, I couldn't change what had happened. But I did learn how to try cases. My first federal case was here in Baltimore, in federal court. And there was a case involving the repair of a ship. At Bethlehem Steel, my opposing counsel said, "Your Honor," it was Judge Murray, Herbert Murray, wonderful man. And anyone here know Judge Murray? And so even-tempered, wonderful judicial temperament. And we went on for like 4 weeks, and my opposing counsel said, "Your Honor, Bethlehem Steel is the largest private employer in the state of Maryland, the city of Baltimore, and the United States refuses to pay for the repair of a ship when this work has been done." And I said, "Oh," I realized I'm in for it now. And I got up and said, "Well, Your Honor, the last time I looked, Maryland's still in the Union, and there are taxpayers who live in Maryland, and they shouldn't have to pay for work not done, not authorized, or not done properly." And we whooped his you-know-what. So what I say to you, I tell you that story not to tell you how wonderful I am, because I'm not, but rather to tell you that if you fail, you have to try again, right? And no today doesn't mean no forever. And you will encounter, there are places you will go, isn't that what Dr. Zeus says? And so you're gonna encounter activities or experiences in your life where it doesn't work the way you want. But you have to get up and fight again. And one of the most gratifying things for me is to encounter some of the same people I met who said you would never be, you could not become, it's not possible. Has anyone here ever been told that they weren't good enough? Too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, too light, too dark, I guess I'm the only one. But what I would say to you is the most important quality, I don't know if they teach you here at the Francis Carey School of Law, but they used to teach it at my house, is you have to have this resilience, right? The ability in the face of failure to succeed. There's a Professor Duckworth who writes all these articles about grit. She talks about the student who has a high IQ and underperforms, and the average student who excels. And the difference is grit. Where I'm from, we call it being hungry. Can you spell the word hungry? Can you spell it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
H-U-N-G-R-Y.
No.
Some people spell it
Hongree. It's an idiom reflecting great desire. And so that's what you have to have. I'm sorry so much for the lecturing. Other questions people want to ask or comments you'd like to make? Yes.
Sure, I'm from Korea, and this is my second law school because already I graduated law school in Korea. Uh, and so I practice in corporate, like corporate or maritime case I practiced in Korea. And after China began to develop their economy, and then suddenly Korea air pollution get worse and worse and worse. So when I choose law school, I choose this law school, law school, because this is so famous in the environmental law. And I'm thinking about being practicing some international environmental field. So have you ever dealt with some international environmental cases, or do you have any suggestion, just like me, who want to be
Yes, I do. Come
international-
down and see me afterward. Take one of my cards, and we'll help you. Okay? And the professor and I have friends who are part of the Environmental Law Institute that has an international bent. The whole idea is to bring the rule of law to solve problems. And so someone like you, who understands the culture of Korea and also has spent time here and understands our culture, you can have an enormous impact. And we want those disputes resolved either through negotiated settlement or litigation and not through a war. And that's where what Paulson says is right. China has to understand that pollution for Korea is not good for China. And it's that, what's that word Martin Luther King used to use? We were bound inextricably. Wow, that's a hell of a word, inextricably. But I hope that's helpful. So, and I don't just say that to you, I brought a bunch of cards. So, others? Yes?
So we heard from us, but we were wondering what got you into environmental law.
Accident, sheer accident. So I told you I failed at my first law firm. I went to the Department of Justice, did well, and I came out and I joined a small firm, and then I had another setback. That firm lost I represented the Puerto Rico Aqueduct and Sewer Authority. They were the #1 target of EPA. My mother said, one day, son, you're going to use the Spanish you've learned in school. She was greatly disappointed. She would have been greatly disappointed to learn that it was my knowledge of Latin baseball players, boxers, and curse words that held me. That's how I used my language. But so it was by accident that I had that experience. But the firm that I was with went under, right? And I applied to a ton of firms. And I received 2 offers. One offered me $25,000 a year more than my current firm. And in 1985, $25,000. It's a lot of money today, but it was a whole lot of money in 1985. And that firm said, if you come to us, you don't have to build a practice. You know what Beveridge and Diamond said? They said, you got 3 years, brother. We're paying you less, and you got 3 years to build a practice. Up or out? So, being the really brilliant guy that I am, I chose less money and a challenge to do something I'd never done before. So hopefully this young man is asking me, why would you do that? I'm glad you asked that question. The answer is, I didn't want to put my destiny in the hands of another person again. And so I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was determined to do it. And then you should say, well, geez, how did you do it? I'm glad you asked that question. And other people helped me. 80% of the people who have hired me are women, and about 80% of them are women of color. So you might say, well, how did that happen? And the answer is, I think women know what it means to not get a fair shake, to be disrespected, to have your comments made and ignored. And they decided to give me a chance. But of course, they expected me, you so-and-so, I'm trusting you, you better win this damn case. And so that's one of the reasons I'm such an advocate on this issue of gender and racial diversity within the practice of law, because I know what it means and I know who has helped me. And and of course, being a father of a daughter helps too. Nothing enlightens a man more than becoming a father of a daughter. But others, come on now. The wine will be there. There's got to be one or two more questions. Yes, sir.
Last question is, yeah. So I work with students all the time, and I get very common. The first year student comes in and tells me they're interested in environmental law, but they want to work for the good guys, the EPA, nonprofits.
Yeah.
And number one, I came from a law firm, so I have a pat answer to give them, and they've all heard this answer probably at one point or another, but I tell them that's not the way to look at things at all. I would really like you to address that, good guys versus bad guys.
Well, once upon a time, the good guys wore white and the bad guys wore black, right? And now there are a lot of gray hats. What I tell people is my clients are the ones that can fix a problem. It doesn't take genius to say that water is polluted, it's dirty, it smells bad, it's whatever. But how do you fix that? And my clients know how to fix it. They now see it in their enlightened self-business interests to be good environmental stewards, right? Think about if I sell products that you have in your home, are you going to trust those products with your children if they're not safe? Of course not. And so that's that's a reality today. And so my clients can make a difference. Recently, I was named the court-appointed monitor on the Duke Energy ash spill. There was a Super Bowl Sunday a couple of years ago, the one that my nephew won. They had a terrible ash spill, coal out into the Eden River. Anybody here from North Carolina or Virginia? Eden River separates North Carolina from Virginia. She's smiling, thank you. And so I had to compete to get this work. And there were two other law firms. One was Hogan Lovells, which is a DC firm that they'd merged with a London firm, and Drinker Biddle, which is a noted Philadelphia firm. And we were in Pitt County, North Carolina. The judge was notoriously conservative, and my scouting report said that he liked Southerners. So I brought with me one of our young partners, Parker Moore. You know, when they have two last names, that's very Southern. And the judge brought us into his chamber. He says, "Where y'all from?" Well, first I told him, well, you know, Judge, that Hogan Lovells, they're a London firm, and Drinker Biddle, they're in Philadelphia. That was Francis Biddle, the secretary. And so he says, "Where are y'all from?" And Parker said, "I'm from Roanoke, Virginia." I says, "Well, where are you from?" And I said, "Well, Judge, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi." "Well, you can't out south Mississippi." Alabama, Georgia, Arkansas, Louisiana, they'll do, but you can't out south Mississippi. But what, apropos of your question, I'd asked him, could I have a few minutes for closing? This was not an oral argument, but that's what I got. So he said, "Okay, what do you want to say?" And I said, "Well, you didn't ask me whether or not I had time to do this, and I'm very busy, but I'm going to make time." I said, 100 years ago, the Duke family gave a significant amount of money to the state of North Carolina, and they built 7 reservoirs. And the location of these water resources meant that people could have recreation. It meant that it was helpful in the development of business, and it is what distinguished North Carolina from some of its southern neighbors. And I said, today, tonight, within the sound of my voice, there's a single mother with 4 children, and she's going to put her 10-year-old in the bath water for church tomorrow morning. And then when that 10-year-old gets out, the 7-year-old's getting in the same water, and then she's going to put the baby in the water. What she can't know for certain is whether or not that water is clean or safe. And she can't go to the food line and buy the fancy water. So my mission here is to restore trust, that people know that this one element without which we cannot live is in fact safe. Bob, he almost got up there and hugged me. And so the point is that if you really want to fix a problem, if you really want to see it different, then you have to be in the middle of that. And I'm excited about that opportunity every day. And the people at our firm are excited about that opportunity every day. It doesn't mean that we don't need people to prosecute and to enforce the laws. We absolutely do need that. But when the day is done and I get on that plane back to Washington, D.C., and I leave that community, as a matter of conscience, I want to know that that community is better off than when I first got there. If it isn't, I've not really done my job. And so if you're interested in that job, if you're interested in making the world better, if you're interested in having an impact on the world, then environmental law is for you. Do you want to be a spectator, or do you want to be an active participant? And I love to play. Thank you.
So you're all invited to go over to Westminster for our annual environmental law wine tasting.